So today we're going to be looking at the theme of the life cycle from the book Women Who Run with the Wolves. And we're just going to be running with that theme and looking at where we can see this play out in other places besides the book. So what has come to my mind is more modern representations of some of these folklore and fairy tales, and so we're going to be looking at a lot of Disney cartoons, just touching on them briefly to see the theme, and hopefully so that we can carry this forward in our mind. And again, my intention is always to get the wheels turning for you, to inspire you, to prompt you to move forward as you are interested to research these things further. So yes, so basically how we're going to be looking at this cycle, the life cycle, is noticing how once the first death has taken place, and again in these stories it's often symbolized by a literal death of a character, right? And remember, you can look at this twofold as being meaningful for you, either all the characters representing different parts of your own psyche, as well as people in your life and just your life experiences like playing out in the physical world. So I love how you can find those patterns both within and without, and I'm just reminded of all these things I've heard throughout my life, like as above so below. And so these patterns in reality seem to be present and related no matter how you're looking at them. You know what I'm saying? Like out in the world, or within us, within our own mind and our own development. So there's just so much to learn, to glean from all of these different exposures we have to stories and these experiences we have in our life. And I just hope that you're motivated. So once this first death has taken place in these stories, the characters, like usually the main characters, seem to wander kind of without a sense of direction. You know what I mean? Because typically the death that's presented usually early on in these stories, in these a lot of Disney movies and cartoons that are based on these old themes throughout time, these fairy tales. The death that takes place is typically a caretaker, parents, a parent figure, and it just leaves the main character just kind of in a daze, and they're just, wandering, searching, and that's a very common response that you see throughout the different stories. But yet it's almost like they're on a mission. So even though they're wandering and they don't have a clear sense of direction, they're still on a mission, and it keeps us on the edge of our seats because it's really exciting. You don't know what's going to come next. It's almost like there's this underlying, undefined sense of danger, and they're operating kind of defensively, and so it makes for a really engaging and exciting movie. But again, if you look closer and you start to see these patterns, not just only throughout these cartoons, which is in itself kind of bizarre to me, it was initially, until I learned that these themes have been present, all throughout different cultures and throughout different eras and history, and how we've just carried these same tales into our modern existence through these news stories. They're just kind of wrapped up with relatable details nowadays, right? But a long time ago, I would notice these patterns, and I would think, why do the parents always die? Why are the kids always orphaned so young? And it was just kind of a mystery. So anytime you can notice patterns, I feel like there's a message there. This is just me. I always feel like, if you notice something like that and it's just really catching your attention, it's meant for you to marinate on, to focus on, to think about, and try to pull the meaning from the pattern that you've noticed. the meaning that resonates with you. And so, yeah, we're always like wondering, what are they going to do next, these characters? What's going to happen next? We're on the edge of our seat. So, just a quick overview of some of these cartoons, Disney cartoons that I realized all have that same theme of the parents or a parent figure that was really important to the main characters passing away early in the movie. So you've got Frozen, which is the one we've talked about recently. The Lion King, his dad died. Bambi's mother died. Moana, in Moana it was her grandmother, but she was very close to her grandmother, and her parents aren't really even present very much in the film, just very little. So it was a transformative experience for Moana to lose her grandmother. And her grandmother's spirit even visits her in the movie, and so it's beautiful. That was like a strong ancestral connection that Moana had, and I think that's kind of what matters, whether it's a dad or a mom or a grandparent or even an elder of some kind that's a family friend, or just some type of figure. I call it like the crone, like from the book, Estes book. It's like that person that fills that role, that elder role of the crone, the one who is wise and knowing and has your best interests at heart. It's like that's the figure that dies. And so what is left to happen except for the main character or characters to be put to the test, to have to learn? They're forced to learn and to grow and to become all that they're meant to be, to fill their role in life. And so really ultimately, and I think that's why these deaths happen early in the stories, because the main focus is the development of the main character. And so really they're, I feel like they're meant to be inspiring to us in that manner. And I also came across this little nugget that was really interesting to me. So apparently The Lion King is based on Hamlet's Shakespeare, because in that story, Hamlet is actually killed by his brother, which I didn't know. I'm not very familiar with Shakespeare. So yeah, so it's really interesting. If you have interest, you could always go back and watch these fairy tales presented in the Disney movies and just try to find these common themes, or the stories, from times past that they're just reflecting, that it's almost like a remake of these stories just for modern times. Another movie that came to mind, I don't think it's Disney, it's called Lemony Snicket's A Series of Unfortunate Events. Jim Carrey is actually like this narcissistic individual in the movie, and it's been many years since I've watched it, but it was really engaging for me. I really enjoyed the movie, and he's just after this family's inheritance, these kids, their inheritance, because they lost their parents, and they're just focused on trying to get by and trying to avoid his snares and his traps, and also simultaneously trying to learn about their parents, their origin. And so and it was also interesting that Jim Carrey's character in this movie, the name was Count Olaf. So just like I'm reminded of Olaf, the character in Frozen. So there may be some correlation there with the reason that the characters in these fairy tales have the names they do. You could always look into the meaning behind a name, the origin of a name, and just possibly find further meaning, further lessons, little mini lessons within the main lesson of these stories. So there's just so much to explore if you have that desire. But yeah, it's essentially, I'm realizing that essentially these characters, it's all about we're watching them develop, and it's a process of becoming all they can be, right? And then so there's this process called individuation, and I've just barely skimmed the surface of this, and this is something I think I would like to explore further. But individuation, like on the more simplistic scale, I would call it, is when toddlers, and this can happen at any age, like anywhere from, say 3 or 4 all the way up till a teenager. But children, as part of their natural development, intentionally try to separate from their parent figure, right? And it's typically the mother. Because throughout history, the moms are the ones, especially with the caretaking, and carrying the child, breastfeeding the child, and it's just, there's this bond, with them, there's supposed to be anyway, this bond between the mother and the child. And so when that doesn't happen properly, then this whole developmental cycle doesn't really go as planned either. But this is a normal stage of human development, the separation from the parent role, the individuation, where instead of the child being so needy and wanting the parent to be right with them all the time, they start to be more independent. And so that's something to look into. And then also there's a lot more to explore in the term individuation. Carl Jung has written a lot about this, and it's just, this concept goes in different directions besides just the toddler development. You see what I'm saying? So you can look into that. I may do it as well. But yes, so going back to, in these stories, there's typically a role that's like a crone role or an elder role that is killed off. And so, let me go back to my notes here. Okay, before we go there, I want to take a step back here. So as far as children going through this normal developmental stage of separating from the parent figure, in order for this to be successful, this is my understanding, in order for this to be successful, there first has to be a good connection with the parent figure, with a mother, to separate from. So if there's not a good connection for whatever reason, if the mother abandons them, or if they're not mentally well, or just very absent and emotionally they're not attuned to their child, they don't pay them any attention, they're very neglectful in that manner, for whatever reason, if there's not a good connection made between the mother and the child, then this definitely disrupts this process of separating and then individuating and becoming their own stable identity. It's essentially like the early stages of developing a unique identity. And we know, to pull narcissism, the theme of narcissism, into this conversation, which is a big topic that I explore, we know that narcissists don't seem to have a very strong sense of identity, which is why they copy a lot of people, which is why they put you down so they feel like they can elevate themselves. Everything's a competition. So there's definitely some type of identity crisis that they're living with. It's almost like this stage of development didn't happen. So it's interesting to look at individuals who you feel like exhibit these narcissistic traits, and then take a look at what you may know of their relationship with their mother, or a parent figure, or if I feel like if a person has someone to fill that role at some point in their adolescence, it's going to make all the difference. So like in Moana, she had her grandmother, right? And sometimes it's just a friend, a mother or a father figure that can fill that role, and it still allows the person to complete that stage of development of becoming who they are. It may be a little bit stunted at first, there may be a delay, but again, we live in a fallen world, nothing's perfect, so as long as the process takes place, that's good, and a person can develop that identity. Now, what can also happen is, if a person doesn't have someone to anchor to first have that strong connection with, to then break away from and feel strong enough separate from, then a lot of people theorize in the world of psychology that this is why you see patterns play out in relationships of like the love bombing and discard, and the love bombing and discard, because essentially it's the same kind of pattern of trying, to create this strong connection so that the person can then leave it. It's almost like a very poor and dysfunctional substitute for this what's supposed to take place early in our life experience, as part of our normal development. It's like the person may not consciously understand what's going on, but it's like just this impulse to connect and discard, and that's not to make an excuse. And I just want to pause here, because I have to have these kind of thought processes myself, that it's one thing for a person to be narcissistic, and which is not good, but it's another for someone to, because a lot of times we use umbrella terms, and we use a term that's meant to capture a lot of qualities and characteristics and behaviors that really it's not the right term, or there's what do you call it, like runoff between the different terms and everything, like the people who are habitual liars, the people who intentionally cause harm to others, people who get a kick out of messing with somebody's mind, or even causing harm or injury. So you start getting into terms like psychopathy and sociopathy and different things like that. And so just know, as we're discussing these things, I'm never ever insinuating an excuse for a person, even if they have been through trauma in their life. It's I understand there are such things as unconscious behaviors, and I do believe in offering grace and forgiveness to people, but it's a whole nother level when we're talking about people who are harmful to others. And so that's just not where I'm trying to take this. I'm not trying to merge all of this together, so just please know that that's a very complicated topic that deserves its own video and possibly even channel. So, and that's for each one of us to work out in our minds, how we feel about all this, right? So I'm never trying to give a pass to someone, is my point. But anyway, I'm just talking about what seems to be a normal part of human development for all of us, and how sometimes it can get derailed or go wrong. And so just interesting, something I happen to notice, that cycle of love bombing and discard seems to almost mimic the cycle of a child, starting out with a strong connection with a mother or parent figure, and that the normal process is to separate, to build their own identity, so there seems to be a relation there. But I feel like the quest, there's like a quest, and I feel like all the characters in these movies are on this quest of finding their identity, of constructing who they really are. And somehow their origin plays a big part. I'm reminded of Elsa going to that glacier, the frozen glacier, how it's the ice cave, and how she's, facing all of the good and the bad of her ancestors, and how it just helped her to strengthen who she was in knowing her origin, her ancestry. So, and then I was reminded of, in The Lion King, there's a character, a little what's it called, a little monkey character, I forget what he is, but his name is Rafiki. He's really cute. He's like the shaman character in the movie. And there's a point where the mate Simba, the young lion cub, is still processing his father's death, and he's just kind of struggling with that, and he comes up on this little puddle of water, and he's looking at, or maybe it was a lake. I feel like it was just a puddle. I can't really remember. Where he's looking at his reflection, and Rafiki, the shaman, he's there to minister to Simba, and he's saying, that the goal is to remember who you are, not discover who you are. I mean, he's young. How can he don't really have a lot to remember. You see what I'm saying? But it's not like figure out who you are, find who you are, find yourself. It's remember who you are. And even as a kid, when I watched this movie, that kind of stuck with me. Like, why would he say remember? So that's something to think about, journal on right there. So ultimately, I feel like we have a couple of options. And one would be to look to our human origins, our ancestry. And I think that's important. And then another would be to look to our soul's origin. Because, even the Bible says, I knew you before you were in your mother's womb. And we could take that to mean I knew you as in I thought of you, or I created you in my mind, or it could mean, we were with God first, our spirit, our soul, before we were, projected into these human bodies for this human experience here in this physical reality. So, we can think about our spiritual or our soul's origins as well. Or, we may just want to look at this, through both sides. Both our human origin and just get what we can from looking into that, as well as our spiritual origin. And I'm having a lot of thoughts come to me I want to share with you all. Oh, so obviously we have our DNA, right? I can't remember how I stumbled upon this, but the other day I did stumble on something that said that there's some research being done in that there's a possibility that there may be more passed down through us that's not necessarily detectable in the physical qualities of like a DNA strand. So like possibly, I think specifically it was talking about ancestral memory. And how, so like, for example, if there was a huge trauma that happened to our great-great-grandparents, that may actually be affecting us today, even though we may not even be aware of it. So that's just something you can research. I've always felt like to think that, as humans, we can know it all about everything. It's just so arrogant. And, I feel like, science, anytime it approaches discovery and searching from the lens of being open-minded and from the lens of everything truly being a theory, then I can respect that. You know what I mean? And because I do think there's a lot that we don't know. I mean, even something as simple as understanding how our eyes, there's colors that I think it was hummingbirds that I read about can see that we can't see. There's like a more to the color spectrum than what we know. Things like that. So my point is, I've always believed there's more than what our senses can detect. I feel like they're limited, and I feel like, to pretend like we have even the capacity to have it all figured out is extremely arrogant. And so, and you're never going to learn more if you already think you know it all anyway. But I hope that this has inspired you to take a look at, your ancestry, to explore some of these topics we've discussed today, and especially to find what you feel like is the origin or the home place of your spirit, your soul, because that's really what we can get rooted in, and find some serious peace and some direction from. And there's a little workbook that I bought years ago that really was great for me, from I can't remember the name of the company. I think it's Well Watered Women, and the workbook is called Redefined, and it's all about that. It's all about our identity in Christ, and so how it doesn't, it's one thing to say it doesn't matter. It does matter, but it's one thing to experience who the world says we are, or how we are defined in this physical reality. But it's another thing to understand our true identity through Christ. And so, anytime we can find, these deeper truths, when we can dig deep and anchor ourselves to these deeper truths that resonate with our soul, it's going to help us to not take these other things so seriously and not be, just tossed around like we're in a storm, and we're just shaking, our spirit's just shaking like crazy, from the stress of experiencing these things in this reality. So if we have this anchor that resonates with us as a deeper truth, with who we are and how we're a part of it, that numinous aspect of reality, and it's going to bring us peace and clarity, I feel like, too. So again, I just hope that this has been inspirational for you. I'm just taking a quick look over my notes to make sure I didn't leave anything out. I probably did. But and I'm trying every day to continue to find inspiration, to bring great content to you. It's just really something I do anyway in my life. It's certainly not a struggle. I enjoy it. I just it's important to me when I make a commitment that, such as, hey, I'm going to be posting a video this day, this day, this day. If I make a commitment like that, then that's important to me, and I want to be able to fulfill that. And so I don't foresee my schedule of posting videos changing as long as I continue to find inspiration that I feel like is valuable to share with y'all. But if that changes, I'll certainly let you know. And I just thank you so much for coming along this journey with me, and I hope that you have a beautiful day. And I will see you again very